Hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tenity podcast. My name is Finnley. I'm Hub Manager based out of the Singapore branch of Tenity. Just to give you a bit of background about myself, I actually came from banking and finance sector for many years, then moved over to innovation, and that's where I joined Tenity actually. So I've seen kind of innovation working from both ends of the lines, and I'm actually really interested to kind of have this session to have a chat more about what's going on in the fintech sector, what's up in Singapore and Asia. And then here I have with me also a co-host, introducing Jonas, our managing partner.
Thanks, Finnley. Also, welcome from my side, everybody. I'm Jonas, heading Tenity here. And my background, I started out as a web developer really long time ago. I went to business school and then launched off the back of that my own startup for 5 years before I joined the Swiss Stock Exchange for a couple of years and then moved to Asia in 2018. First to China and now 5 years in Singapore, heading Tenity here, growing Tenity, and super excited about the space. And I think we are just at the right spot here.
All right, thank you, Jonas. So I think at the top of everybody's mind in Asia right now has to be Singapore FinTech Festival, right? Like we just had the event 2 weeks back. It was actually a whole week long full of events and stuff, and then the main conference itself actually spent 3 days. So just to give you a bit of context about like how big this event actually is, we have, I think, recorded over 60,000 attendees from across the region, across the world, flying into Singapore just for this specific event itself. There are, of course, a lot of expert panels talking from topics ranging from quantum computing to AI applications and even ESG itself. And so I think, now at this point in time, Singapore is really abuzz with like what's going on. We're still trying to, understand what we have learned and to also see how it applies to the area that we're in as well. Like, is this the experience that you have with Jonas? How did you like the event?
Yeah, it was great. To be honest, I'm still a bit digesting all the events and topics from last week. So yeah, catching up. It's always extremely busy, but also very productive because the reality is it is the fintech event in the region, and everyone is flying in for SFF. So I really like it because we get to meet people from across the region, actually from across the world, but also everybody in fintech in Singapore is part of this. So very, very productive week.
Definitely. So I think in this podcast, I mean, there are a few things that we would love to discuss, right? Like I would love to have share a little bit more about the fintech landscape in APAC in general. Of course, the emerging trends and technologies that we're seeing in the market, and then any challenges and perhaps opportunities that we are facing. So just to give a bit of like context to this discussion itself, of course, Tenerity's position as a VC firm is quite important to note. We're in the business of like transporting, right? I think that is biggest the biggest I guess challenge and opportunity for us to be able to spot things ahead of time so that we're able to catch and ride the wave, and not be too early not too late, which is of course the biggest challenge in investing. Maybe just to share a bit more about like fintech landscape in APAC, I would love to hear from you, Jonas, like your maybe experience with fintech in Asia actually.
Yeah, actually, one of the reasons why I came to Singapore and specifically remain in fintech is because I've seen actually the growth of fintech in China when I was there from 16, 17, 18, 19 onwards. But we are now in Singapore, and I think it's the most vibrant ecosystem in the region. We have now 1,600 startups in Singapore. And there was just a new report by PwC and SFA. They are now about, on average, 5.5 years old, which indicates the industry it's maturing. And I think it's the hub of Southeast Asia, right? So from here, a lot of startups do incorporate and then go out into the neighboring countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, etc. So it is a great spot. You have of course, also a lot of financial institutions here. So if you are in the B2B space, Singapore is great because you get to collaborate with financial institutions, and they can become your customers, investors, collaborators. So that's really, really helpful. And maybe lastly, why Singapore was actually the place to go when we expanded as Tenity from Switzerland to Asia. Singapore, in terms of government support, regulatory clarity, rule of law, it is a fantastic
Mm.
place. In a way, unique, or at least a front runner in that space in APAC, and we really appreciate that about Singapore. So that's why we're here, and that's what I'm really seeing.
I think it's also kind of interesting to take note also of the fact that, like, I mean, all of this didn't happen overnight, right? It's like it's more than a decade in the making. So when I
Mm,
first came out to the finance sector, honestly, fintech was just starting out back then. There was not much conversations about it. People were aware that we needed to innovate, but at the same time, like how to do it, I think Singapore was at the stage where we were kind of modeling it after what we're seeing in Silicon Valley, and then kind of applying it to the Asian context itself as well. So to give it, I mean, to give it some to give it a fair shot, right? Like fintech in Asia actually is pretty new. It's pretty young as a industry, and the just to just like what we heard, right, that like Singapore, like the average age of fintech companies in Singapore is only like 5.5 years, and that's not really kind of enough time to really see a second waterfall effect where, like, the larger unicorns are able to kind of contribute back to the ecosystem as well. So I do think that there's still a lot more to be done in not just in Singapore but Asia in general. So we are also seeing a lot of, I think, trends regionally, um, that are kind of following a little bit in like Singapore's footsteps, right? Like starting
mm,
first with a lot more government intervention, a lot more government support into the innovation sector. I think that's definitely a good first step as well. So
yeah.
I mean, with all of this, I think definitely Asia. I'm super stoked about. I'm super bullish about. We are also investing quite a lot in the region as well. Would you maybe like want to share more about like what are some of the regions that you are really big on?
Yeah, maybe I just want to add one more thing, which um, you just mentioned regarding the ecosystem. I think Singapore has done a really great job in starting to build that ecosystem, and everyone wants to model it after Silicon Valley. We just have to understand Silicon Valley basically started in the 60s, and it really does take time. And especially what I'm seeing with angels, early stage backers, and early stage VCs and investors in the venture space in general, those are formerly successful founders that have had
Mm,
outlier success and are now investing back into, I would call it a bit crazy idea, or disruptive ideas. And the traditional investor family office, maybe here in APAC, they've maybe made their money with real estate, and their mindset is maybe less about technological disruption. So I think it does take time. We need to see more exits here. We need to see IPOs, so that these people will come back and keep backing. If we talk about, what are we excited about in terms of regions, I think Southeast Asia obviously is a big region, but it actually comprises of a lot of different countries. Um, 600 million, more than 600 million inhabitants live here, but really the big markets are Indonesia, clearly the biggest, and I think Singapore is neighboring Indonesia, so it's a great market for us to explore. Malaysia is next door on the other side, and then we have also the Philippines, which are markets that we're exploring. We've been recently to Thailand as well this year a few times. I think a number of family conglomerates are quite heavily going into venture as well. So let's see what's going to come out of Thailand. But what's at the moment also really hot and being tapped from Singapore is India. So the Indian
Mm.
market, 1.5, 1.6, somewhere billion inhabitants. They've had recently quite some success also with IPOs. Stock market seem to work there quite well, and you really have global VCs that are now setting up shop in India, raising local funds, and are very very bullish on India. And just having spoken with a number of LPs as well, I think having India exposure is something that a lot of people are looking at right now. So I think India also for us, we have a number of portfolios already in that market. Just the sheer size is, of course, something that cannot be kind of left out. So I think India is exciting, and then maybe the lastly, the big elephant in the room, China, being a very large market as well. But unfortunately, with recent governmental
Mm.
interventions and regulation, etc., really venture hasn't done well, and a lot of funds have pulled out. What I'm seeing right now, though, is that founders in China or Chinese founders are now going into the region, and Southeast Asia is a great region for them to go into, and they are launching their ventures in Indonesia or in countries across here. So there might be a number of very successful Chinese founded startups coming out of Southeast Asia.
Right. So as I mean, that's where I think lies the opportunity for Singapore as well. Because when we talk about access to Southeast Asia, I would say that Singapore is actually well poised to be that connector for the region. Mainly because I think a lot of people outside of Southeast Asia, or like a lot of the further like counterparts, like we even at our headquarters in, like, Zurich and Europe, right? They don't realize diverse um how diverse the Asian markets are in general. Like, I would say that, you know, for every single market that we have, we actually approach it really differently. Mainly because the exit strategies are different, the opportunities for M&A are different as well. So I think it cannot be like a one size fits all approach. And then that's where being here in Singapore gives us that edge, I feel.
Yeah, and I think one more thing we didn't yet mention, but also, of course, the problems to be tackled in this part of the world are often different to what we see in
Mm,
the developed world, right? It's underbanked, underinsured. This offers a lot of these are different problem
mm.
statements than you would have in Switzerland. So I think it's really great for us to be here in the region and be very close to these markets and understand what is actually happening on the ground and what the needs are.
Right. So on to that topic then maybe let's touch a bit more about like emerging trends and technologies, especially in the Southeast Asia region. So I think um the top of the topics in SFF this year was actually AI as usual. So I think AI has been ongoing for a while. We are also seeing a lot more adoption or wish for adoption. But after all, with large corporate, this kind of stuff does take time. So I think AI has been a big topic for the second year in a row at SFF already. Then we still have Web3 and blockchain. So I mean, you know, despite like everything that happened in the Web3 space in 2 years back, right, in 2022, actually the market, it seems to be picking up for blockchain. So we're seeing a lot more solutions in there coming back as well. And then the last thing would be sustainable finance. So ESG is a huge topic in Asia. I think, Jonas, coming from like Europe yourself, you would see that like Asia is always going to be a bit like two steps behind in the ESG space, right? So that is a topic that maybe has been around in Europe for a lot longer, but right now is gaining a lot of traction in Asia, mainly because the regulatory kind of environment is actually catching up to it. So with the UNDP 2030, 2030 goals, like
Right.
we are like a lot of people are actually moving towards like reaching those targets, the net zero targets by then. And then governments are catching up in Asia, it seems. So yeah, on to you. Maybe like what do you see as what are you excited about in this trends?
Yeah, I mean, definitely AI is the overarching trend. Also in fintech, and we've seen a lot of different startups coming up with ideas, solutions, yeah, really attacking problems to be solved using AI. Maybe, best is just to really mention a few. So we have, for example, transparently.ai. They are using AI to detect public accounting fraud. So they're basically crawling public accounting information of publicly listed companies, and they can actually give you um, they basically do the work of an analyst that would take about 3 weeks to analyze whether there's something fishy with these accounting statements, and they will tell you what what might be wrong also. So it's great also for auditors, it's great for investors, and they can actually detect, and that's back tested, 3 to 5 years in advance before a public accounting fraud comes out. They can already detect that something is not going right with these companies. Really applying AI, Gen AI in particular, a great startup based here in Singapore and going global right now. Um, Another startup from our recent portfolio is Inriskable. They are actually using Gen AI for prospecting for banks, especially private banks. In the event of, let's say, a high net worth individual going public with a company related to him, this would actually trigger a liquidity event that can be interesting for the relationship manager to then reach out and understand whether there's a need for new investments. There's money available, and that can be deployed. So these are use cases that our startups are working on, and there are obviously many more, such as um, an AI CFO and topics like that we are currently exploring. So there's a lot coming out of that angle. Then in terms of Web3 and blockchain, we've worked with a number of layer ones this year. I think RWA's real world asset tokenization is a very big topic. We've seen a number of startups coming out with tokenized treasury bonds. Basically 4 to 5% yield on a staked USD, or actually a stable coin, a yield bearing stable coin that will provide you 4 to 5% annualized yield. So that's something that has really been very popular in this region. So RWA, then stable coins. So it's actually somewhere in between RWA and stable coin, those yield bearing stable coins. These are big topics right now. And to be honest, since last week with the US elections, um, having a much more crypto friendly government in place in the US, which will hopefully bring more clarity towards crypto. I believe 2025 is going to be, frankly, globally, a very big topic on that we should be on the lookout. Of course, in Singapore or in Asia, some of the use cases that really seem to work quite well are cross-border payments using cryptocurrencies. These are use cases that are really already implemented and quite well matured, I would say. Then, lastly, I think that the whole topic about sustainable finance is an interesting one. What I'm seeing, like coming from Europe, what I'm seeing here is actually it is more of a top down than a bottom up. So I'm seeing more governments basically imposing regulation in that space and basically getting um, banks to implement these measures, getting supply chains, more transparency on supply chains, and then being able to finance them at the better those SMEs at a better rate, for example. So topics like that are really big. I think it is currently still driven top down, but hopefully also investors are more and more interested into sustainable products. What's your view?
Yeah, no, I think we're still I think for us like Tenity, we do a lot of like we invest into a lot of B2B startups, right? So the unfortunate thing is that like in the B2B space, sales cycles are extremely long. So while we are, excited and we really want to invest into like the next like shiny thing or the biggest thing that's upcoming, but I think it's also a bit for us as a VC that challenge, right? That like you can't be too early either because we have a fund return timeline that we need to meet. So then like if the startup takes too long to actually reach a product like to reach commercialization or to reach product market fit, then it's essentially like a risk for us as well. So I think one of the topics that I missed out on mentioning that's really huge at SFF this year is actually quantum computing, and that's something that a non-techie like me struggles to understand as well. But I know you have a background in like in tech, right, Jonas? Like, would you be able to share more about like quantum computing, like how it's impactful, and also like if for us to be able to invest into this space now, are we too early? Is it like the right timing? What should we be looking out for?
Yeah. Disclaimer here, I'm definitely not a quantum expert. But we had a great corporate roundtable last week with two quantum professors and a quantum startup, um, which really gave us a lot of insights and updated us on the state of quantum, as it was also a topic around Singapore Fintech Festival. What quantum is really good at is optimization, solving optimization problems. And maybe the one example that is easy to understand what is an optimization problem. It's for example, a logistics company needs to deliver packages across the island from in Singapore from Changi all the way to JB. What's the most economical route to take? And for a traditional computer, that's really, really difficult to come up with the most economical route. But for quantum computer, these are problems that are extremely suitable to be solved. And this can now be basically transferred into finance. If you are a portfolio manager and you have thousands of options to invest into different stocks, which stocks basically give you the highest um, return at the lowest risk. That's basically the optimization problem here, for example, to be solved. And that's actually a problem that quantum could solve really well because it's a very, very hard problem for traditional computers. Um, Now the challenge really is that we are at like a few hundred qubits. In the traditional computers, we talk about bits, bytes, and bits. In quantum, we're talking about the qubits, and we are just at a few hundred. In order to really challenge traditional computers, we need to be at the um, we need to be around 100 million qubits to really, really be able to solve major optimization problems and also really to compete with traditional computers, meaning we are far away from the scalability of quantum. So, what works right now, however, and that's what one of those startups are doing, is that you take a very niche, narrow use case and you solve it. You solve just a very, very niche use case, and the remaining part of the calculation, for example, that you need to compute, you then still work with traditional computers. So they're really now solving a number of use cases. They're running POCs. I think that's really where the state of quantum is. We're running POCs, and people are trying this out until we are, at a sizable qubit number that then allows to actually run bigger bigger calculations. Um, and these are the use cases that they will require compute. Of course, there's a topic around quantum um, in the security space. Quantum computers that might be able to hack traditional encryption. This is a very different topic. Of course, there people are now really changing the algorithms to quantum safe algorithms, encryption, so that they cannot be hacked in the future. And also, if a state actor, for example, is harvesting data, and that data cannot be decrypted in the future using a quantum computer. So very clear there. I think in the cyberspace there's a lot of activity. In the actual use cases, still early.
All right. And I think that that also leads us to the last part, right? The a good segue into the opportunities and risks of the opportunities and challenges in the VC space as well. So big topics like quantum computing and AI. Actually, one of the things that I guess is the most challenging is access to talents, right? That's the thing, you want to build like great stuff, but you also need like great talents itself. So I see that as a potential like a kind of a barrier to developing this, because a lot of the talents is actually moving into, like, for example, Silicon Valley, right? Where we're seeing so much more of these things happening, and a lot more startups there kind of building, and there's also a lot more funding there as well. What do you see as where maybe VC space can come in Asia to solve that problem and to be able to also have access to such technologies?
Yeah, I mean, funding has been very difficult the last 2 years. Frankly, I'm a bit more optimistic after last week that the venture industry is having a bit of a revival. Definitely, we do, everything does lead a bit to a US economy and the
Mm,
Silicon Valley in that sense. So I'm kind of hopeful that things are really turning around next year. I think one so just in general, macroeconomically thinking things will turn around next year. On the other hand, I also think um, VCs and investors, but also startups need to basically also become a bit more realistic here in this part of the world. We are not in Silicon Valley. Valuations cannot be the same. Um,
mm,
ARPU, the average revenue per user in this region, is significantly less than in the US or in developed markets like Switzerland. So really understanding and not directly comparing with these markets is important. And through doing that, I think we can kind of get back to yeah, much more flourishing and times also in the venture market here. But like I said, again, there are always markets that seem to outperform. At the moment, it's clearly India here in this part of the world that seems to be doing well. And in terms of, I think one of the challenges always, for example, in Singapore is talent. um, Talent is just really expensive. It's not easy to
mm.
hire. So yeah, it's up to us also as incubators, accelerators, and VCs to help these founders to find talent nearshore. That can be in the Philippines, Vietnam, right, Indonesia, and that's what a lot of companies have been doing. They really look at a more regional setup, hiring people from across different countries.
All right. So I think that's a very positive way to end this conversation as well. I think there's still so much to be done in Asia. Like, we are a growing region, and I'm super excited to see what else Tenity can bring into our portfolio in the coming months as well. So just to end off, maybe a note from Jonas, would you want to share a little bit more about like what's Tenity's vision in Asia, and then and then we can close it off.
Sure. So we definitely continue our growth path here. We are investing from our current fund. We just had a second closing, so really excited for that. So we are investing. We are running incubators twice a year with 10 startups per cohort, investing in startups across the region. And like I said, I'm very positive for what's to come next year. And join us on this journey. The hustle is real here in Asia. Things move very fast, and yeah, get on board.
Okay, you heard it from Jonas himself. Follow us on LinkedIn. Follow us, the Tenity team in Asia, to find out more. Keep in touch. Yeah, see you all. Bye bye.
Bye bye.